Moses and Elijah are the most important prophets in the arc of the Bible. They bring up multiple images. For instance, Moses and Elijah are wilderness forerunners of the land-conquering heroes. Moses, with Joshua, who literally conquered the land, and Elijah, who prophetically conquered the land of Israel. Jesus is a greater Joshua and Elijah who's carving out a new land and people. He will accomplish this through his death and resurrection. After the Transfiguration, Jesus talks about John the Baptist, the prophetic wilderness forerunner for Jesus. Moses and Elijah also start new phases of the covenant, like Jesus is doing. They both witness God's appearance on Mount Horeb. However, Jesus is the appearance on Mount Horeb. We also see the disciples mention making tabernacles, and that's because tabernacles and temples are associated with the mountain of God. In fact, they are architectural representations of them. We get a taste of all that Jesus is in the Transfiguration. Here we have the law and the prophets represented in Moses and Elijah, who are both on Mount Horeb. Jesus is a priest who serves his Father in glorious white garments in the tabernacle. Jesus is a prophet, like Moses and Elijah, who speaks God's words and reveals the restoration of all things. Now, the king is not represented because we have a son of David who is willing to die for his people here. He who has not yet been lifted up on the cross or ascended to the Father. Jesus takes all that humanity is up into the glory of the Father and represents them. He brings all of history to its summit and climax. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here. One for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah." He was speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." When they lifted their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead." The disciples asked him, "Then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come?" He answered, "Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, and they did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. Matthew 17, 9-13. The law and the prophets being represented here also reminds us of the twofold witness to Christ, which is found in the rest of the Bible. The entire Bible points to Christ. Also, you have the prophetic witnesses of God in the past, and the Father himself bearing witness to this event. In fact, there's another 2 witnesses. We have the fullest pictures of the witness of 2 or more, which begins as a legal establishment in Deuteronomy, that we get in other parts of the Bible as well. The Father asked the disciples to listen to the Son, even in the midst of the most influential prophets of the Bible. Jesus' voice has primacy over all eras, and is the one that needs to drive the interpretation of the other parts of the Bible. In the Bible, generally, going to mountaintops is associated with entering the presence of God, establishing the covenant, and worship. The disciples go up with Jesus and see his glory. And that's what we do when we gather at the church every week to worship him. We see the glory of Christ. Before and after the story, Jesus talks about his suffering, death, and resurrection. That is the glorification of Jesus. And that's what we are to see when we gather around him. And this is what we are to share in as we become like him. Christ here is also put forward as our supreme teacher and discipler. In the presence of Moses and Elijah, whose teaching sustained Israel for thousands of years, and who wielded massive authority over the people of God, we hear of the Father asking us to listen to his beloved Son above all else. The church is to regard Jesus above all other pastors of the people of God and all past teachings. This is not to say to not listen to any voice outside of reading the Gospels for yourself, but this is to use the scriptures as revealed in Jesus as your lens in which to view everything.